I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome our special guest today, Alex Wheatle, to the Literacy for Learning conference. Alex is an award-winning, acclaimed novelist. Your awards include the Carnegie Medal, the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize, and an MBE for services to literature. Your incredibly successful Crompton Night series has been adapted for theatre and soon to be TV as well. Your life has been made into a film by Steve McQueen. It's a really impressive list. So Alex, we're so thrilled to welcome you today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And as you were mentioning the introduction, I'm thinking, wow, did all this happen to me? But it really did. So I'm honoured to be with you.
It's absolutely, the honour is ours, I can assure you. Alex, I think if it's okay with you, we would love to kind of kick straight into your new book, Cane Warriors, and get chatting about that. We're really excited about the text. Would you mind starting us off by giving us a short reading from the book?
Absolutely, yes. I'm going to read a short extract from when my heroes actually start the revolt. They have been given a task to kill their overseer. And so this is quite vivid in description. So, but I think it's necessary though, just to get the flavour of what the book is all about. And so the two main characters are Moa, who's only 14 years of age, and Keverton, who is his 16-year-old friend. And they have just completed a day's work in the cane fields, and now they have to do this grisly task. So I'll start from there. We dropped our bowls and mugs in a wooden box. Miss Gloria didn't meet our eyes. Fireflies hovered over her cooking pot. We collected our billhooks from the water tub. I sensed all eyes on me. I glanced up and down the dirt track. The western hills were now crowned with an amber glow. My heart pounded like old Mr. Cliff's hammer when he was fixing a large wheel. I shared and now I never looked with Keverton. He nodded. The small creatures in the field had already started their nighttime arguments. I gripped the handle of my knife so tight that redness appeared under my nails. Homea had stopped putting her handcart on her way to the moorhouse and watched us. I felt her eyes burning into me. They would soon come for me, Moa. It might be tonight they would drag her out of her cabin. If she refused, they would take her anyway. I didn't want to fail her. My heart started to beat a warrior drum song. I prayed that the sky god Naomi would guide me. Pickney stopped playing. Say, I whispered to Keverton, say the door bolted. Bolted or not bolted, we have to kick it down. And then Keverton dashed towards Mr. Donaldson's hut. I soon caught up with him. If my heart could have run, it would have reached the cabin first. We both kicked the door down. Dust flew up in my eyes. I blinked furiously. Mr. Donaldson was taking his rest on his bed. He only wore his pants. His chest and feet were bare. His back ripper was on a table beside him, next to an open Bible and a wooden cup. He shot up quickly, not quite believing that he was being confronted by two field slaves armed with billhooks. He went for his back ripper. Keverton hesitated. His weapon trembled in his right hand. I didn't want to see Keverton whipped again. I didn't want Mr. Massa to force me to view his broken body. I couldn't bear it to dig Keverton's pit. I didn't want to see him dangling from a thick branch. Fear left me. Naomi was with me. I charged towards my tormentor. The whip crack was loud. He caught me on the neck and the pain was deep and intense. It didn't stop me. Use both hands, Louis had advised. Dig deep, twist. Make sure he don't breathe another dirty breath. I'll stop there.
Thank you. It's a pretty gritty place to launch us in. This book doesn't pull any punches, does it, Alex? You've kind of, yeah, you really get in there with the violence and aggression. Why was that a decision that you took in writing the book?
Because I just wanted to relate how it must have been like for those cane warriors to actually start this revolt. I cannot whitewash it in any way, and it had to be graphic, just like I had described there. And it's very important for any historians to understand what it was like and to understand the fear and the hesitation and all these emotions going through Kevinton and Moa's mind because they had to complete this task just like they did in real life. I mean, this happened in 1760. And so, really, I'm just trying to enter the mindset of those heroes, basically, and to graphically show the reader what they had to endure and what they had to experience.
You've given us a really helpful introduction. So Cane Warriors it's historical fiction based on true events set in 1760. I think that brings us nicely onto some of the questions that we've got from students who have been reading the book in their Literacy for Learning book club. So we're going to hear a few questions around your inspiration for writing the book from Ria and Angus and Rennie.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Ria, and I've got a couple of questions. Why did you choose to write this book on slavery? What was your inspiration, and why did you call this book Cane Warriors?
Right. I was speaking to my mother, and she was raised in the parish of St. Mary in Jamaica. And she remembers the elders, her elders, family elders, speaking about Taki, who was the leader of the slave revolt in 1760. And it was mentioned that Taki walked the very lands where she was raised. And that fascinated me, to know that my mother could well have been a descendant of these Cane warriors. So I looked into Taki's story and it fascinated and compelled me. It really did. I couldn't quite find confirmation of Taki's existence in Africa because he was born in Western Africa, in Ghana, in the Akan district. And so apparently some people say he was a prince, some people say other things, but he was apparently a very important man in Ghana. But anyway, he was shipped into slavery to Jamaica. And there he worked in the master's house. And there he planned this Easter revolt on Easter Sunday, 1760. And I looked around, I looked on Amazon and just to see if anybody else had even attempted to write a historical fiction about this revolt. But not yet, as far as I'm aware, not yet. And so for me, that history actually demanded a story. And I was captured by it. And I think it should be part of any canon of Caribbean history that's been taught or studied. And it's very important to me, obviously, because of my personal readings are connected with my family. And so, my motivation is that I want today's children through slavery and the attempts to try and escape from that slavery. And people need to know this story and understand the motivations and.
Thanks, Alex. Sorry, I think the internet wobbled a bit. I don't know if that was just for me, but I caught what you were saying. I think what you were saying about those stories that we perhaps don't learn, perhaps in schools at the moment. So our audience is going to be students and teachers, and we know there's been a big conversation about the stories and the histories that we do and don't learn in schools at the moment. What's kind of your take on that? What do you think is missing from schools at the moment? What do you think we should be learning about?
My experience in schools, in particular history, was basically King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, crop rotation, Queen Elizabeth I and her armada. That interests me. I'm not going to lie about that. But also, obviously, as a descendant of Caribbean African heritage, I wanted to learn more about what happened to my folks, my ancestors, and so on. And I never really was taught about that, not until I found myself in prison after the Brixton riots of 1981. I was given a book by my cellmate, The Black Jacobins by the great C.L.R. James. And that was the first time I had been introduced to a perspective from Black people, if you like, and that was the slave revolt that occurred in Haiti in 1791. And so I was always interested in trying to find out as much about my heritage and history as I possibly could. And so when I stumbled upon Taki's story, it was just a no-brainer for me. I really had to write that story. As regarding to what is taught in schools now, I guess the curriculum is very tight because there's only enough space for certain narratives to enter the curriculum. But I really hope that the powers that be don't just look on English tales or Scottish tales, especially as the UK is so diverse. I mean, you go to a school in London and you see faces from all over the world. And I think we should try to represent that and try to engage them with histories that might speak of their own heritage and own culture. And I think that would lend to more engagement in being taught history and so on. And I mean, there was a kind of disaffection with me in history because I didn't feel part of that history. Even the Second World War, I felt a bit removed from that when that came up later on when I was 14 or 15. And so I think it will be a great help if students, not just Black and brown students, but any student can learn about what happened in Jamaica, India, Australia, all these different places where our children have heritage.
Yeah. And in terms, I mean, you've described that experience that you had in prison, finding that book, which you felt you had that more personal connection with. So is that that kind of focus on ensuring that people feel represented through books that they read, is that something that you think about as a writer when you approach your stories?
It's something I definitely think about when I'm sitting down to write a story. I'm thinking about my audience, who would benefit from this narrative. And it goes back to when I was a kid. And I remember when I was 5, 6, 7, I caught the reading bug quite early, as many writers do. And what I had available to me were comics. And that included the Beano. I'm sure you're much too young to remember these, but there was a Beano, Whizzer and Chips, there was a Dandy. And at least I had some reading material. But now and again, I would ask my 6, 7, 8-year-old self, wouldn't it be great if there was a Black character like me within those pages, that I could relate to, that I could really engage with about my life experiences and so on. I wanted to read about a Black kid in a children's home. Even though I much enjoy these comics and these short narratives and strip cartoons and so on, I so much wanted to read about someone like me. And I think I carried that on into my own literary career. And so when I began writing and when I was published, I said to myself that my life experience is very important. And so are my friends. And, I was living in Brixton at the time. So obviously I wanted to tell a narrative about what it was like for someone of my generation to live that Brixton experience in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And also I wanted to write something about my children's home experience as well, which I think is very important because I approach fiction as everybody's life is worth value and worth a narration. And same as with Cane Warriors, I still have that kind of mantra inside my head that Moa's life is important, Kevington's life is important. Brenton Brown, in my first novel, Brixton Rock, his experiences, his life journey is very important to me and to those who can recognize that and relate to it. And so, I've written 15 novels now, and I always come with that same mindset that the characters that I'm creating on the page, they're very important and their lives should not in any way be diminished, all because they might be from working class stock or poor stock or whatever.
I think that definitely comes across in your books, Alex. I mean, Yeah, I last year read Homegirl, and I felt like I knew Naomi. I've taught in Croydon. I felt like I knew Naomi. I thought that she was one of the students that I recognised from my teaching days. It's something that comes across so clearly in your characters' voices are so real. And, you know, whether that is kind of, you know, the streets of Crompton and what that dialect looks like, all the way through to historical Jamaica, and even in those first pages of Cane Warriors, we're immersed into that very urgent conversation in this kind of Jamaican Akan dialect between Louis and Moa. Yeah, and I know that Rennie, one of our students, was really keen to understand that process. How do you go about sort of writing that dialect and thinking about that character's voice?
Well, to be honest, Faye, writing in Jamaican dialect is so much easier than trying to figure out how young people speak today. I mean, I cannot get away from the fact that I'm in my 50s now. And so how down am I with slang on youth culture and all these things that you know that informs a writer. And so I was very fortunate in a way because I was a youth worker for a number of years. So I picked up many slangs there and phrases that was so cool. I just had to put it on the page. I mean, that's how the Crompton series was developed because I had a good ear. But sometimes I have to guess, and sometimes I have to invent. And so in the whole Crompton series, there's a mishmash of different things going on. Me being inventive, me remembering certain phrases and slang that I picked up when I was a youth worker. And there's certain stuff that I picked up from traveling around the country, going to schools from Scotland to West Devon or somewhere. And so I always had that ear, even when I was a young man of 15, 16, when I was trying to acclimatize to the Brixton dialect. You know, so I always paid attention to how people spoke and their reference points and their slang and so on. So basically, with the Crompton series, it's just a cooking pot of all those influences that I've had, and I've added some of my own ingredients as well, and it comes out as this kind of Crompton speak, which I'm quite proud of. But as for Cane Warriors, I'm just relying on my mother's tongue, my father's tongue, and every time I go to Jamaica, I hear that lovely, bouncy Jamaican dialect that I just fell in love with. So, and for me, that's part of the character's, you know, it's part of the character if I represent their dialogue and dialect in an accurate way. And there's some Spanish in there too. So I just try to be faithful for that, and because it becomes more authentic if you do that. I can never have Keverton or Moa speaking in the Queen's English, can I? It just wouldn't ring true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've mentioned that obviously previously most of your novels are set in sort of contemporary or a version of contemporary South London. What was that like in terms of your writing process? So to shift from that contemporary South London setting over to historic Jamaica, did you have to approach that process differently?
Yes, I did have to approach Cane Warriors differently. I had to get myself in a mindset way back in the 18th century. But again, I was very fortunate because I had done my homework. I mean, as far back as 1987, my father actually on a day trip took me to Port Maria, where the slave revolt was in its ascendancy, and he took me to the writer's house. What's his name? Noah Coward. Noah Coward has a estate there called the Firefly Estate, and this was right next door to the weaponry, to the battlement that Taki had raided. And so I wasn't aware of this before I actually visited the site, but that just filled me with all kinds of imagery. It really did. And that stayed with me. And every time I go to Jamaica, I try to return to Port Maria just to feel that kind of atmosphere, the environment, the energy. And so that stayed with me when I came to write the descriptive scenes. Because when Taki leads his army to the North Coast, you know, they go through hills and gullies and so on. And that is just me remembering my journeys with my father in 1987. And we trod over those same routes as Taki did. And so that really, really helped me immerse me into the history of the narrative. That helped me a lot. Because obviously with Crompton, I live in London and I've been to many urban cities, Manchester, I teach in Manchester, Edinburgh, Birmingham, all these major cities I visited, and I've seen how people live, the council estates and so on. So all of that is an influence on the geography of Crompton. So that's helped me a great deal. I mean, I could not create Crompton by just sitting in my chair. I've got to get out and about and observe things and listen to things.
We had another question from one of our students, Chloe, who was really interested in the writing process specifically.
Hi, my name's Chloe and I've got some questions. What was your favourite part of the book to write? What did you think made this book interesting? And how did you come up with the plot and characters?
Right, some very interesting questions there. What was my favourite part of the story to write? I think the interaction that Moa has with Keverton. For me, that's like a brotherly love. You know, it's quite tender, it's heartwarming, and really the story is about their friendship and how they support each other. So that was my favorite part. It really was, because sometimes we rarely see books that have some kind of bromance of just guys just being there for each other. We see it obviously with a man, woman, but hardly ever with two guys. It's not sexual in any way. They just adore each other and they protect each other. So for me, that was the most interesting part and the most heartwarming part that I had to create. And what was the other question? Can you remind me?
Harry was asking what made it interesting to write.
What made it interesting was how at first, Faye, I was going to write the story from Taki's perspective. He's an adult. But when I started to conduct my research and I discovered that many young people from 12, 13, 14 years of age, they were obliged to do is started to think about was what that must be like.
Yeah.
Like of dawn, working the cane field. And so that fascinated me, that compelled me. And for me, that made the story. It really did. That dynamic of having to go through that experience on a daily basis. And then out of the blue, you're asked to join this revolt. How do you react as a teenager having to perform this incredibly dangerous task? That fascinated me. So for once I thought about that, I just had to write this story.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear, Alex, and I think it comes across absolutely, especially in Moa and Keverton's relationship and the way they kind of learn from each other and go through all of these, as you say, dangerous, difficult, tragic experiences together. The moment that you shared at the beginning where they're kind of completing that first task that they've been set by Taki, it's difficult to read, and there's that sense of tension throughout, isn't there? I guess. Yeah. Do you think, in terms of having created Moa as your hero for the text, do you think there's that sense, there is that moment where they're talking about their hope for the future, and maybe this will be the last battle, and maybe people won't have to live like us in the future? And obviously, as a reader, a contemporary reader, that's tragic to read, because you know that slavery didn't end at that point, and it did carry on, and we know that we're still seeing the ramifications of that today. Do you think there's something about having your hero as that teenager, that hopeful teenager, that makes it even more emotional and even more tragic in some ways?
Yes. When we create our heroes, we have to have hope in their hearts, I think. Otherwise, what are they fighting for? That's a question that creators have to ask. That they have to fight for something. Otherwise, it won't mean anything. If their struggles and their pains and their agonies won't mean anything, what have they died for? And so there's got to be something at the end of the rainbow, or at the end of the tunnel that they could see, that they could hope for and wish for. And it's quite simple. I tried to make it very simple for what their end game was, or what their end hope was. And that was just to raise families, to breed chickens, to have goats, and just live a clean life. That was it. And this aspiration, this hope, has not really left the Caribbean in recent years. I mean, my father talked about my grandfather, and he said to me, "That's all we hope for, that he could raise his family well, he'd have enough to eat, he'd have shelter, and that's all we dreamed about." So it's quite simple in a way that, sometimes we live in the West, and sometimes we get a bit greedy about the things that we dream for and hope for and so on. Everyone wants a brand new 70-inch color television and a screen and this and that, all the games and whatever. But I've been to poor parts of the world. I've been to townships in South Africa. I've been to the ghettos of Kingston, Jamaica. And sometimes a family just wants a decent meal on a Friday or Saturday. But their hope is, or their dream is no more, is just as worthy as anybody, say, in the UK wanting a brand new house. And so, and I have to make it tangible for them, that they have to feel that they can achieve that dream. And I think that's very important for a creative like me to reflect that, because I'm hopeful that when people read Cane Warriors, they'll start to think on their own hopes and their own desires and what they want out of their lives. And this is how I hope it connects with everybody, wherever it's read. Because, hope is real. Hope can keep you alive. It kept me alive at some point. It made me, when I was kind of desperate, when I was a teenager, when I left care and so on, if I didn't have hope, who knows where I'd be today. And Simeon was part of that, who I met in prison. He offered me that hope as well. But hope is very, very important for all of us. So I wanted to make sure that was recognizable in Cane Warriors, and they were fighting for something and hoping for something.
It's really powerful. Thank you. For any of our students who are watching today, and their hope is to follow in your footsteps and to become a successful writer, what would you say to them? What would your tips be?
I would say to anybody who wants to follow my footsteps in writing, or indeed anything, is to follow your passion. Now, if you want to be a writer, what moves you? What do you feel mad about? What do you feel good about? What stories do you want to tell? What stories would you like to buy? If you went to your local bookshop and you close your eyes and you wondered what would be the perfect story to read, what would that be? And you should write it. Absolutely, you should write it. So always think about what interests you, what fascinates you, what compels you, and you give it the same value as anybody else out there. And I would advise not to try and copy anybody else. Just follow your own kind of gut instinct of what you think would make a good story, and what makes a story make you laugh, make you cry, and entertains you. Because at first we write for ourselves. With Cane Warriors, I'm writing for myself because I feel it's a story worth reading. And so that's what I'm putting so much investment in it. So that's the first person you need to satisfy, yourself.
And what can we expect next from you? So you've taken us around the streets of Crompton, of South London. You've taken us to historic Jamaica. What's next?
Another slice of Jamaican history, but this time like an adventure story. I remember when I was 8, 9, 10, I read Treasure Island. I read that at 9, I think. And that's always fascinated me, always go back to it at times. And so I also kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean film series. And so what I've done, I've kind of come up with a narrative where we have a female hero this time, and she sails the 7 seas. She gets to go to Panama with Captain Morgan. It's an adventure story like no other. And so that will be available, I believe, in 2022, early 2022.
Sounds fab. I can't wait. We'll be looking out for it. Alex, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything else that you would say to our Literacy for Learning students and teachers who are listening to us today?
I would just say enjoy the reading experience. Go to your library, whether it's in a school or in a public building, and seek out something that will entertain you. I mean, reading has opened so many doors for me, and it's a great leveler. I mean, if you can imagine reading the books that, say, President Obama read, you could be just as intelligent and knowledgeable as he has, or he is. And so, for me, it's a wonderful, wonderful leveler. And when I was young, I never went on to further education. I never went on to university. But what was a great leveler for me is that I had the library. I had the resource at the library where I could pick up anything I wanted, and if it wasn't there, I could order it from the desk, and I could be satisfied in that way. And that's really opened up my eyes to all over the world. I mean, I could read about what's going on in Thailand in the 17th century. I could read about what's going on in Scotland in the 13th century. And so I've become a very knowledgeable man, all because I went into a library, and because I'm interested in people, I'm interested in history, I'm interested in social issues of today. And that makes me the writer I am. And so I'm just reflecting that onto the page that I write. So if you're interested in writing, you've got to be interested in people. And for me, once you have that, you can become a writer.
Alex Wheatle, MBE, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you again in different circumstances.
Yeah. Yes, one day I hope to see you all live. I mean, wouldn't that be great? I cannot even remember the last time I was speaking to or addressing a live audience, but wouldn't that be a fantastic thing? Let's hope for that. Yeah. And again, very happy to be with you, and stay safe, stay well, and read well.
Thanks, Alex.